Welcome to Nintendo Voice Chat for the week of July 16th, 2015. I am Jose Otero, and this week we're dedicating a very special episode to the late President Satoru Iwata of Nintendo, who passed away this weekend. Joining me in this discussion is Brian Altano.
Hey.
And Per Schneider.
Hello, Jose.
Now, I do want to kick this off with just putting a little bit of context for people, because I know a lot of people listen to Nintendo Voice Chat, but you may not know a lot about Nintendo, internally, or you may not be too familiar with Iwata himself. So very quickly, Iwata was appointed the first successor to be the president of Nintendo that wasn't part of the Yamauchi family, the family that founded the company. And this be his leadership started in May of 2002. Under that leadership, he took Nintendo on to some amazing early success with the DS and with the Wii, and then some struggling times with the 3DS and with the Wii U. But we're here not to so much chronicle that entire period, but rather just kind of celebrate the man. So the first question I want to ask you guys is, so what is your fondest memory of Satoru Iwata in this industry, in this business, whether it be when you were before you joined IGN to after, if you met him in person, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I've met him. I've met him a few times. For the first time in 2001, and it was at E3. And what I thought was notable that usually whenever we went to gaming events with Nintendo, they'd give us an American contact, right? Like George Harrison, or before that you had like Howard Lincoln and Peter May and all these guys. You got Jim Merrick, Perrin Kaplan, got to talk to them a lot. It was very rare that they put somebody from NCL forward who wasn't Miyamoto, right? Mr. Miyamoto, of course, being such a well-known name, it was always kind of like the special interview you could get and talk about a big new game in depth. And so in 2001, right at E3, someone from Nintendo of America pulled us aside and said, we want you guys to interview Satoru Iwata. And we said, oh, hold on, that's, he was at HAL before, he's a general manager now at, director general manager at NCL, but we had no concept kind of like, how do you interview this guy? What do you ask him? What does he know? Is he like Yamauchi? Is he completely focused on the business side? Or does he know, is he still, really focused on development? And so, we got the wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You should talk to him because he's probably going to be the successor for Yamauchi. Like, he's first in line. So they actually gave us this heads up. And so with that in mind, we walked into the interview. And you can read the interview on the site. You can tell it's still very much focused on, it focuses on kind of like the games and the development, but it also focused on the strategy. And we sat down with Iwata-san and Jim Merrick, who at the time, was going to build the Nintendo Online Network.
And you guys knew that.
We knew that, right?
Yeah.
And so there was actually an announcement, and we kind of expected having Jim and Mr. Iwata in the room. We thought, okay, well, let's talk about online. But the interview ultimately didn't go in that direction.
I was surprised.
They didn't want to talk about it. I mean,
I
you
was
saw the
surprised
interview.
you let off with that question. I'm like, okay, you have Iwata in the room, and the first thing you guys ask is, so what is Jim Merrick doing? And I'm like, who cares?
Okay, hold on. So, no, we cared. Because, and again, we had no concept of Mr. Iwata. Now you look at Mr. Iwata, he's so visible, right? Just looking at Iwata Asks and how much he kind of embodies the spirit for Nintendo and like kind of like this laid-back, calm Japanese businessman who has a great sense of humor, but is also just knows a lot of stuff and got his hands dirty coding.
Yeah.
But so with that interview, we didn't know what to expect. So our first question was, what does Jim Merrick do? Because we thought this E3, the E3 2001, would be the E3 where they announced their online plan. Everybody's been talking about online, right? And so
the rest of the industry was going there.
They didn't. There was nothing. And so then... well, the answer was it's a big secret, and that was it. And then we moved on, and we talked to Mr. Iwata about other things. And we found very quickly that Mr. Iwata not only had an answer for everything. You could ask about the business, you could ask about the development side, about the creative side, about the ideology, about the creativity of the company, about the history. He knew everything. But he also was very outspoken, and he would tell you, in the first interview, I think, or maybe it was a later one, we asked him, what do you think Microsoft's doing? Because Microsoft was the new kid on the block, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, they were not seen as a gaming company. And, if you listen to the interview Ryan did with the 3 Xbox leads at E3, they basically say, hey, we had no idea what we were doing.
Right.
And that's what Iwata said.
Yeah.
He's like, they don't know what they're doing yet. You know, it's always good to have lots of people in the gaming business, but Microsoft's first announcement to gamers and the games industry community was, we will have a marketing budget of $500 million. And he's like, that obviously gets you press, but we would rather say, here's what we're going to do. Here are the games we're going to publish, and then worry about the marketing budget later, right? Like, he was very outspoken at a time, honestly, where you would not get that kind of frankness, especially from a Japanese businessman.
Yeah.
And so that moment, like when I met him for the first time, and he looked like a very different guy. He looked more like a programmer, right? Like, you know him now as he's a slick-looking guy in a three-piece suit. Yeah. He did not look like that, right? He looked like a programmer with long hair in his face and thick glasses. Yeah. And we were really impressed. I mean, we walked away and we're like, okay, we get it now. We can see where this guy's going.
Okay. What about you, Brian?
So I never met him, you know, which kind of bums me out, because I met Miyamoto. I interviewed Miyamoto with you. I met Reggie. I interviewed Reggie with you. We've interviewed a bunch of other people, right? A bunch of high profile creative people and business people at Nintendo in Japan. And I never had that moment with him specifically, but I was introduced to him the way everyone who listens to the show is introduced to him, and that's in that he represents this sort of pivot point between someone who is the kind of like joyless business of Yamauchi and someone who is the front-facing, childlike, you know, excitement adventure of Miyamoto. He was that perfect middle point between those two people, in that he knew what he was talking about. He was running a profitable business, but he also smiled. Yep. And he had joy, and he exuded passion and care and understanding. And there was something about his voice and the way he sort of kind of delicately explained, very calmly but very kind of excitedly, that something surprising was about to happen. And he did that in his directs. He did it in his interviews. He did it in E3 live shows. He did it anywhere where he had a place to be. He would say his voice was the voice you heard before some of the most important video game announcements to come out of the Nintendo of the last 10 years. He would say something and it would be like, and now we have one more thing to show you, and we have one surprise, or and now we have the world of the Legend of Zelda, and you would see something for the very first time, or you would hear something for the very first time. And he was sort of the guy that showed you the magic show. Like, he was the announcer. He was the face that was like, here, like the when you go on a ride at Disney and there's a voiceover, that's what he was to me, as someone who was the person that would pass on these moments that I would forever remember, that would introduce games that became iconic parts of my upbringing and became parts of my career and my job, that brought me that brought me across the country, where I fell in love and got married and met you awesome people. Like, all of that is important. All of that is connected. Everyone who listens to this show is connected by that same feeling of someone who wasn't just a stock businessman, someone who wasn't just a PR mouthpiece, somebody who gave a shit, really passionately cared, and could smile and held up bananas and did goofy things, that goofy, endearing human being that you don't get when you get people coming up and they just talk about sales charts and numbers.
Ridge Racer.
That, like, I mean, I not to name names, but there was a lot of people at Sony and Nintendo, or at Sony and Microsoft at the time, and historically pretty much every company. You watch any press conference that isn't from the video game industry the rest of the year. You like we saw one for the Oculus, we saw one for iOS products.
When there's a very short list of standouts, right? Like, I feel like Phil Spencer is a standout, similar to Iwata, that when he's on stage, it's more than just a businessman. I feel the same way about Shuhei Yoshida. Yeah. Another great example of a gentleman who, when he's on stage, there is a sincerity to the way he talks about games.
Right. And to go with my sort of like magician thing, the pocket trick of reaching into your coat and pulling something out. And we've seen Nintendo do it for so long. We've seen it with the Wii, which is a pretty big thing to hide in your pocket. We've seen it with tons of DSs, where they'll be talking about something, and the next introduction in our family is and they pull out this thing, and within seconds you're like, I need that.
So the showmanship, like, that's the odd thing about Mr. Iwata, right? Like, you look at him and you said he smiled, but he always had this half smile.
It was a smirk.
You know, like there's actually, if you build your Mii, there's an Iwata mouth there.
Yeah.
It's like, it's kind of neutral, but there's this kind of this glint, right?
Yeah.
Like there's this, he always has this look like he knows exactly what you're saying, and he knows something that he could be saying but is not going to. Like I always got that feeling. But this showmanship was really unique in that he's not your traditional presenter. He's not your like Steve Jobs, right? Who like steps out on the steps out and commands the audience. And I think Phil Spencer is much more of that kind of presenter too. What he reminded me of were the original Nintendo Wii commercials, where you had two Japanese guys ring the doorbell and say, "We would like to play."
Yeah.
And it's such an odd moment, because like everybody gets it. They're like, "Oh my God, these guys are so Japanese. How can this possibly be fun?" Right? Like they're so formal in their attire and in their introduction with the bow. And that's exactly what Iwata was, though.
Mm-hmm.
Like you got this. It seemed kind of, I don't want to say exotic, but it seemed kind of out of place when you see how stark he is and how kind of like how serious he is, and then he gets sucked into a 3DS and a mustache appears on his face. Right?
Or he fights Reggie.
It's this
right?
it's this weird dichotomy between somebody who's very, very measured and serious, but then can be so goofy. And like if you read the Iwata Asks, and it's like every paragraph ends with
well, everybody laughs in Iwata Asks, right? Everybody laughs.
And some of it is no doubt nervous laughs, right? When the Chacho is there interviewing you. But some of it is just this kind of like joy. They know they're creating entertainment, and they talk about the serious business of games and the serious creation, but they all know it's for good fun.
Well, I want to talk about that a little bit before I get into my fondest memory. I mean, I feel like Iwata Asks, to me, like Nintendo historically, and even to this day to an extent, is very much a secretive company where, the things that are getting worked on that haven't been shown are not going to be talked about in any concrete fashion until they're shown.
Yep.
But when a game would ship and an Iwata Asks would come with it, it just felt like the symbolic equivalent of kicking open the door of Nintendo. And for just through that interview, offering a glimpse at, here is how we made it, here's some of the things we went through thinking about and sort of talking about. I mean, there are Iwata Asks interviews where there are prototypes just lying on the table. And people openly talking about, so we thought this can be an interesting take. I remember that with the 3DS. I remember that with the Wii U gamepad when they were talking about making Miiverse or making the internet browser. They had like a cardboard cutout version of the Wii U gamepad, and I'm just like, this is so incredible to give people that much insight. And it isn't the whole story, but it's enough of the story in a way that's interesting.
And it's a new story. It's like, again, like when I was young, like you, Jose, and covering Nintendo, it was a company that didn't even send you screenshots.
That's right.
Like if you read, Tom Russo had a nice comment. He used to run Next Generation magazine. He had a nice comment about Mr. Iwata, and he says, it seems trivial now, but I probably was complaining to him about Nintendo never sending us screenshots that were high-res enough to be put in a magazine, right? That's how Nintendo was. They didn't even care about exporting beautiful screenshots. They had some crappy ones and slides and stuff.
Well, they've never bullshot either.
And that's the old Nintendo. And if you go back, the only people back in the early days who had access to Nintendo information were the Japanese mags like Dengeki or Famitsu. But even the Famitsu game previews were like, there was like a picture and then a caption saying like, "Oh, look, Mario seems to have a new weapon. We wonder what it is." And they didn't write that to be coy. They had no clue what it was because Nintendo wouldn't say anything, right? And so this completely changed. This level of access of not only telling you about the creation of the product, but telling you about the names of the people involved was a huge change, right?
And then you saw it transition to Nintendo Direct, which became a way to announce products. And then you look at the digital event, and it's sort of a combination of the two. Or maybe it's not Iwata asking questions, but it is very much spotlight on their developers in ways that, I mean, we get access to these people, but not to the degree that we can make that kind of a video, not to the degree that we can show people some of these really cool prototypes or interesting things. And it's ultimately like, post Yamauchi, I mean, whatever. You can't compare him in a lot of ways to Yamauchi because Yamauchi was the president of Nintendo in a time when there was no social media, when the internet was just starting out technically. And so there wasn't really an approach that a game company took to presenting information. But I absolutely am floored by how much it seemed Iwata worked towards being part of presenting that message. And that's what made his passing so hard, I think, on all of us. This is the face of the company.
And that's because you have somebody who comes from a development background, and you're getting this now with other companies like Sony and Microsoft, right, where the business lead, the pure business lead, in Nintendo's case, the NOA president used to be a lawyer, right? Like, it's such a different time now where people who grew up in development are coming to the forefront leading businesses. Hey, I'm leading IGN. I started as a writer, right? Like, you couldn't imagine that for an internet business back in the days either. And it's great. It's just great to see those people not forgetting the roots and their original sensibilities. And like, you're getting all this access to developers because Iwata knew how important these developers are to the future of Nintendo and how you have to shine a spotlight on them, even if it is risky and people can see who the creative people are, and they can be, stolen by other companies.
Well, and when does that happen? I mean, that's kind of the craziest thing about the company as a whole, right? Like, people who started making games 30 years ago are still there today.
But that was the worry in the Atari days, right?
Yeah,
like with Activision, where the creators like David Crane, who created Pitfall, wanted their name on the box and were denied, right? And that's why they split off and created a new company. And it's great. That's why it's so great to see, how Iwata's success and rising up in the ranks and preserving that.
So
bringing it back.
My fondest memory is actually, so I never met Iwata either. Unfortunately, in my time at IGN, he did not attend E3 those years. So I was unable to get that opportunity. So I was a wee, I don't want to say a wee lad, but someone who definitely didn't have experience in this business in August of 2007 when I showed up in San Francisco. In the following year, in 2008, I believe it was in February, Iwata was the keynote speaker at GDC.
Oh, yeah.
And I will never forget this because for a handful of reasons. Now, I don't quite remember the keynote that well, and I'm actually kind of sad because I can't find that. I can't find too many entire clips of it. Like, it's around in pieces.
We have the entire transcript, not the video.
Are you sure you're not thinking of the 2005 Heart of a Gamer thing? Because that one was different. This was a following year where Iwata was standing in front of the room in the most pimped out leather suit coat I had ever seen. He looked like a rock star, and I was surprised to see him wear that because I never saw him wear something like that again.
I see.
But it was sort of a leather jacket top. He was talking about Nintendo's approach to games. And I was just sitting in the audience, and I was just amazed by the things he had to say. 2008 was the year this was a thing. So 2005 is the famous Heart of a Gamer conversation / discussion, and that was the one where he kicked off the presentation with that quote. That's actually a really fun one, which I found that. You can find that on the internet and watch it. Because most people aren't talking about this, but Per, during that GDC in San Jose, during that presentation, he says, "Does anyone have a birthday?"
Oh, yeah.
And he asked people to stand up, and he starts picking people to come on stage to play Mario Kart DS because they were going to show a quick network demonstration of it. And whatever, you can call that marketing because that to some degree is what some of that is.
No, that's the one I was thinking of.
It's so sincere.
Yeah.
It is absolutely sincere.
Yeah, we have the entire transcript of that
from
one,
2005.
So
2008 I cannot find in its completion. Maybe I have to look up on a GDC's conference website. But regardless, I remember sitting in that room being amazed and then being embarrassed because I set an alarm on my phone because I had to. I worked another job, but I had that week off. And so I had an alarm on my phone, which was supposed to go off, meaning you have to leave because you have to have the other job. And it went off in the middle of his presentation.
Oh,
and it was I was that guy, and it was the ringtone was the worst ringtone. It was the codec beep from Metal Gear. So I was just like, oh my goodness.
You were that guy.
Reached in my pocket carefully, hit the button, and just went, I can't believe
people didn't hear it and look at you funny.
I'm sure people did. You don't make eye contact with them. Just keep looking at Iwata.
Right.
That was my thing.
Yeah, and I did like his keynote speeches. I think they were great. He was very frank about the risk of the mobile business and the how it brings down game prices and value and all that, right? And some of the things that he warned about are very much true nowadays.
Yeah.
I also love his commitment always to gaming. The other great memory I have of him was we did an interview with him and Mr. Miyamoto at the same time, and I feel like that's when he really comes to life. When he is sitting next to Mr. Miyamoto, and Mr. Miyamoto he's a total goofball, right? Like he constantly cracks up. You can see he just had some crazy idea for another game in his head, and and he'll just say it too, like I wonder, if you could do this and this, and then just the interplay between him and Mr. Iwata, it was just kind of like. it felt like friends.
Mhm.
You know, it felt like there was this kinship. And it was amazing about both of these interviews. So we had interviewed some of the Japanese folks like Mr. Miyamoto, and Mr. Miyamoto always had a translator with him, Mr. Minagawa back in the old days, or Bill Trinan, who
we
had
talked
on
about last
time,
week,
right?
yeah.
And so Bill was there for the very first interview that we had with Mr. Iwata, and Bill translated the first couple of questions to Japanese and to English. After a while, like, we would ask a question and Mr. Iwata would just answer, like, in Japanese. And we're like, hold on a second. So he understands every word we're saying.
He did,
Yeah.
yeah.
He was never
yeah.
off, and then he just started speaking
Okay.
in English as well. Like, and you can tell how much more comfortable he got with dealing with the foreign press, with, you know, the English-speaking press over time, and, you know, just delivering all these big keynotes and
Yeah.
and presentations in English.
All right, so then let's transition over to our next segment, which is I'm going to try my best to make these as quick bullet points as possible, but I wanted to talk a little bit about things that maybe people didn't know about Nintendo's CEO. And this is compiled from a bunch of places, right? One of them, in fact, is on this table. It's this book that I bought in 2010 called Nintendo Magic: Winning the Video Game Wars. It is by, that's Osamu, what's his last name? Inoue. All right. And you can find this book on Amazon. A bunch of other places I found some of this information from were interviews with 4Gamer, Hobonichi, Game Center CX, and maybe some others that haven't been listed here. So, for example, here's a fun fact for you guys. Obviously, people know Iwata was born December 6, 1959. But did you know, sorry, I got to mute my computer. Did you know that he was the oldest son of a prefectural official? His father was, in fact, a politician.
Mm-hmm.
Around the time that Iwata started at HAL, his father, Hiroshi Iwata, won the election to be mayor of a city called Muroran. It was mentioned in a New York Times story. Iwata's father was mentioned in a New York Times story, which I found a link to. Basically, through a friend, I learned he served from May 1st, 1979 to April 30th, 1995. His father.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And his father had passed away in 2008. And it was just interesting to find this fact because recently I asked you guys to check out that Game Center CX where they had played Balloon Fight.
Yeah.
And he brought up his parents' disappointment in the fact that he went in to become a video game programmer.
Which totally makes sense now. Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, now you got it. Yeah. And he.
It's hard to go from politician to balloon fighter.
Yeah. No. Pretty much. He joked his father didn't speak with him for almost half a year, but I still feel it was more of a joke still, and you could definitely tell it worked out in the end. So another fun fact: his first programmable computer was a Hewlett-Packard HP 65 calculator, which he apparently bought with money saved from a part-time job as a dishwasher and some money from his father. He brought this up in that 2005 keynote where he said, you couldn't say my games had bad graphics because they had no graphics. And he talked about how basically he programmed some,
It's a good trick.
some games that him and his friends played on these calculators. 1978, he received his first personal computer, a Commodore PET, personal something, I forgot, but this was kind of like a response to the Apple II.
Yeah.
Right? It was Commodore's version of the Apple II.
It's before Commodore blew up in Europe with a 65.
That's right. And this was one of the first all-in-one computers that had an integrated monochrome display, a keyboard, cassette tape reader, floppy disk drive on later units. So it turns out that Iwata would basically write programs and store them on cassettes. Then he would take them over to a department store to show them off to either friends or even employees there. When he was a sophomore at the Tokyo Institute of Technology in college, a group of store employees started a small company called HAL Laboratory, and they invited him to join. And you guys know the famous story about HAL, of course, right? Stay one letter ahead of IBM because each letter is one earlier.
Well, based on the 2001 HAL computer, right? That's the HAL.
There was also
that's
that
what
too.
It's based on.
Yep, absolutely.
So they borrowed that.
Cool. Just a few more then. Some people may not realize Iwata rescued Mother 2 from a very troubled development cycle. It turns out that game was roughly in development 4 years before Iwata saw it. And he basically convinced Itoi and told him, if you continue this way, it doesn't seem like you're going to finish anytime soon. So he offered them 2 ways to proceed. We could either take what you have now and fix it, and that's going to take 2 years, or you can let me start fresh, and it's going to take 1.5 years. And with that, he worked on the game, and it was able to ship.
Yeah.
Now this is Earthbound Mother 2, the Super Nintendo game, which was on the Super
everybody knows.
Famicom, Super Nintendo. Yeah, it's very, very beautiful game, right?
Yeah.
Like one that we've talked about on this show all the time.
And you can see already in these stories, you can't judge a book by its cover, right? He seems when you don't see him presenting on stage, he seems like almost like a shy person, right? Like I remember seeing Yamauchi. I never got to interview Mr. Yamauchi, but I would see him at Space World walking by with his entourage, and it was like the emperor was walking by, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody bowed, and it was like you could tell people were scared of this guy.
Mm-hmm.
When Mr. Iwata walked by, it was a very different vibe, and he'd be very kind of almost shy about the whole thing. But when you then hear about how he made an impact, he grabbed the bull by its horns, right? Like he in the Game Center video that you described,
Yeah.
where Cacho and Chacho are talking, he talks about how he got his job with Nintendo. He just walked in there, right? Like he's like, I just walked in and I showed them I'm programming this
Yeah,
game.
can you let
give
me
a
make
job."
Famicom games,
Yeah,
please?
I want to make
Yeah.
games. It's like,
Yeah.
wait, you just told him you want to make games? He's like, yeah.
Yeah, and I read he was the only games programmer at HAL. Initially, HAL started out making PC peripherals. They were not involved in games at first, and he helped push that.
Right.
Just a few more, and then we'll move on. But the original prototype for Smash Brothers, which was at the time called Dragon King: The Fighting Game, because they didn't know really what it was. I love the story that he basically programmed it. Now, this was the president, I believe. I think he was the president of HAL at the time, but he was programming it on the weekends since he was working on another project at the time. He had a special feeling about this project even before they had landed on the idea that Nintendo characters would get used instead of these very generic-looking sort of humanoid characters.
Yep.
Here's two more,
By
and
the
we're
way,
done.
very remarkable that it was Nintendo characters beating each other up, because
know.
that was an age where they were very protective about what characters could do. Right? They would laugh at the question, like if you said, "Could what could you do with these characters?" They were like, "Oh, Mario would never do that."
Yeah.
Right? Like they were very, very protective.
Well, and there was
and
even
so,
they latched onto this thing of these are Nintendo toys fighting each other.
Well,
And
no,
I'm just
that's
like,
how
well,
that's how
could
they
you- that's how they
justified it.
explained it.
I
Yeah,
think
like
that's
to
how they
people.
got it past. You know, kind of past the brand control.
Well, look
if
at the
you will.
opening cinematic. I mean,
Yeah.
it's toys getting thrown around, right?
You
And then
fight a
all of sudden they
giant
wake up.
hand. I
That
mean,
too.
like it's a child playing with his toys.
Yeah,
you know?
pretty
Like,
much. Yeah.
It's which I love.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me too.
All right.
And I also hate because those toys are why I have so many damn amiibos.
There's 3 more out in the UK now.
I
more?
ordered
Yeah,
them.
no, do it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Already?
they're on the way.
Yeah, mine too.
Oh,
Yeah.
you guys. All right. So Iwata's last work
Thanks,
as a
Iwata.
as a programmer in the field happened when he was general manager of corporate planning at Nintendo. This is a wild story that, in fact, was talked about this year. This came from an interview with 4Gamer. Basically, Iwata said something happened, and it looked like Smash Bros. Melee wasn't going to ship on time. He went to HAL Labs in Yamaishi and began as the acting head of debugging. Basically, he spent 3 weeks performing code review, fixing bugs, reading bug reports, and figuring out problems and getting people to fix those problems.
AKA playing Smash.
Because of that, they were able to ship the game out on time for its November 21st, 2001 ship date in Japan.
So this is echoed later in our very first interview with him, and we asked him, "What is your job?" He said, "Head of problem solving."
That's how they
Right.
did. That's what he said.
That's how he described it. He said,
Yeah.
"People call me the head of problem solving." You can see, even in his earlier career, he was that. He was
Yeah.
not afraid to lead the debugging process. you
No,
know?
no, and especially for the president of HAL to say, he was a general manager at Nintendo corporate planning. Said, "Yep, we're going over there and we are fixing this," and
Yeah.
he is rolling up his sleeves in there. Like that's an impressive story. Here's one of the last ones. This is the last one, and then we're gonna transition to something else. So on December 2nd, 2004, the DS launched in Japan. The original DS, the OG. We're talking about the bigger one,
fatty.
not the DS Lite. Yes, the fatty, as some describe it so eloquently. On that day, Iwata was headed to, so it's spelled Tohoku, Tohoku University in Sendai to meet with Professor Kawashima. He had basically been talking to Kawashima about the Brain Age project, and he wanted to personally take a demo over to him to see his reaction. He had the demo. I think they set the meeting in September, but he didn't get to see him until December. And it's just funny because the story goes that the meeting was set for 30 minutes. They spoke for 3 hours about that project. And that project was the first game that Iwata produced after taking the job of president, and it was a super successful brain age, especially in Europe, apparently, more so than Japan and here in the U.S.
They actually spent most of those 3 hours trying to say the word blue in 3D.
Oh man,
Who could forget that?
I remember
You have,
that.
don't you have an aunt that like fell in love with that thing? That she
Yeah,
still does
my
her?
my wife's aunt still checks in on her brain age every single day on
Yeah.
her whatever DS she has from like 7 DSs ago.
Really?
That's great.
Like there's one day she missed like 2 years ago, and she's like, God, I didn't get a stamp that day.
So I think that what you just brought up just shows you the spirit of reinvention too. And I believe Mr. Iwata had a big hand in kind of that direction, right? Like if you think back to how he started with games like Balloon Fight, which are hard and hardcore games, right? Those are tough, those games. And then Earthbound is really it's a hardcore.
It's still an
classic
RPG. It's a Dragon Quest clone RPG.
And then for Nintendo to constantly pivot, and like you got this era where they invented the fitness games genre, where they invented the brain training genre, where they basically created the virtual pet genre as we know it now.
Balloon
right?
Fight's the first endless runner, pretty much, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about what is all over the iOS store now, and what was kind of interesting about what happened this week was it was tragic, but it also gave people a reason to see for the first time that this guy wasn't just a mouthpiece. He wasn't just a face. He had been making games for ages. And I went and looked, and I'm a huge Nintendo fan. Obviously, I'm on the show. I went and looked at the games that he executive produced or had his hand in some capacity, and I was floored at how many games he has a name in the credits for, even stuff that he worked on originally when I was a kid and I was playing video games. His work has been there for ages.
Yeah, one of the first projects they did for Nintendo when they convinced them to let him play games was pinball, to fix the pinball game, because pinball was apparently another troubled project.
The NES game Pinball?
The NES
which
game
I love.
Pinball.
It's not good, but I love that game, especially when it has that little, there's a side area where you can get in and Mario has to hold up the pinball and free the princess.
Yeah.
It's really goofy. I played it in Animal Crossing.
Yeah, no, and definitely you I think you make a great point in that under Iwata at Nintendo, the mentality shifted from chasing hardcore gamers to chasing everyone.
Yeah.
From finding out why people stopped playing video games or finding out why people never wanted to play a video game and discover the best ways to get those people.
Yep.
And that's why, the struggles with Wii U and the struggles with 3DS, which, I mean, we were very, we're a weekly show. We talk about these things. I just find a shame because I do feel that he had a plan towards where that company was going. And I'm very curious, a year from now, 2 years from now, how much of that plan is going to be seen through, and if it does, in fact, turn things around for them.
And I hope we come across as respectful in our discussions whenever we talk about when we play armchair designers and armchair presidents of big gaming companies. When you're creating a new piece of gaming hardware, you're throwing a dartboard at a dart at a board that isn't there for years, right? Like you're saying, you know what? The tablet market is huge. There's an issue here where, kids are sharing the televisions with their parents. Therefore, we have a wonderful solution, a device that you can play,
Right.
you can turn the TV off. They're doing that at a time when that may be a huge issue, or they're predicting that to be a huge issue. And then years later down the road, it's not anymore, right?
Yeah.
And the market changes. And there's a new device. And tablets are a great example, something that came out of nowhere that nobody could have anticipated.
I liked your thing about throwing a dartboard. I think you should.
No,
revisit
yeah,
that.
they
that
were
was really
throwing
good.
a dartboard.
I think that should be a
at the
metaphor.
heads.
You have half of a really good metaphor.
Yeah,
there.
Really?
thank
Is
you.
this like the tea table, but with Pear's dartboard?
Yeah.
Yeah, no one ever. I mean, yeah, you don't throw a dartboard, so I love that.
But what I'm saying is that it's easy to say I can't believe these guys are doing this, and why was Nintendo so reticent to embrace the mobile market, right? It all comes from a pride in being a game maker and a hardware maker, right?
Well, and what we
you
say
can
comes from a
sense-
pride in being part of this industry.
Yeah, and we come from the perspective of we want the biggest audience possible to play these games that we really enjoy. And it's like it's sad to me that my kids are playing iPad more than the 3DS, for example, right?
Yeah.
And so I very much in favor of seeing an Animal Crossing on an iOS device or an Android device. Whereas like that Mr. Iwata is all about preserving what makes a Nintendo device special, and that's the product on it. And I'm happy that he came to terms with that. Right, there was some pressure, obviously, but he came to terms with the concept that you can create something different on these devices that hopefully will not take away from them.
Well, yeah, and it's very much a sort of an Apple-driven philosophy to some extent, a little bit. I mean, you can get iTunes on a Windows platform, like that is a thing. But yeah, he did have a vision for, what this NX would be. He had a vision for Nintendo as an entertainment company. I felt like he was saying that more and more. It was less about not so much stop making video games, but more what are other ways that we can satisfy our customers that aren't related to video games, and just the sort of building ideas around that. And so again, I just bring up that point because I feel like a year from now, 2 years from now, we may forget that some of these initiatives and some of these ideas started from this one man who saw both the best and brought out some of the best qualities in Nintendo and saw some of the harder times at Nintendo.
And there were some really cool turnaround stories too, right?
Yeah.
Like the 3DS launch was not great.
No.
Right? The software wasn't there. I think when the 3DS was shown for the first time, everybody who saw it said, "Oh my God, like the 3D effect is really cool.
Yeah.
How do you do this without glasses?" But by the time it came out, it was more common.
But it wasn't just a
right?
software issue. It was also price. That thing was
And the price was
$250,
high.
and it was a lot. It was the most expensive Nintendo handheld yet seen at that time.
But a year later, the story was very different.
That's right.
And like, if you look back at the 3DS, in years you'll look back and you'll say, "There's some pretty freaking amazing games on this platform."
And the Ambassador program, which was the apology to everyone who bought it early. Do you remember that?
Right?
Oh,
The
yeah.
Ambassador program.
And so
Still haven't deleted that certificate off of my
and I think
either.
that to me is a newer Nintendo listening to its audience as well. Like back in the Yamauchi days, the message was always customers do not want to play online games, right? And there was a big dot at the end of that sentence. That was a period, and Yamauchi would not entertain any other viewpoint. And I think it's a very different era with Mr. Iwata, and that's why I encourage people to speak about Splatoon and say it should have voice chat, because I do think this is a company that listens and that will adapt its experiences to a changing market, as we have seen with the 3DS, as we have seen with the Ambassador program.
And I mean, we've talked enough, I guess, about this, but I'll never forget watching him play Wii Tennis on the stage at E3.
Yeah.
Like, that was one of the things I was just like, what? Him and Reggie side by side, the executive team, as they called themselves. There was the unboxing of a Wii U. I mean, when have you ever seen a corporate president do an unboxing video? And he put on white gloves, and he said, "These white gloves make me feel like Mario." It was some sort of translation like that. But just going through all of that,
it's this kind of childlike toy maker kind of sensibility that where you just don't expect him to act the way he does, and it was just really charming. I was initially, when Nintendo launched all the direct and the more kind of like putting its execs in the programming, I was like, is this just a gimmick where they had success with some of these Reggie memes and now they're leaning into it, when in fact they should leave the presentations up to like real presenters? But they stuck it out, and they really made me a believer in being able to tell a message that felt very genuine by having the Nintendo leadership and Mr. Iwata.
Well, and I think that it sort of goes with everybody's kind of expectations as gamers as to what Nintendo should be as a company, and what their consoles should be like, and what their games should be like. And they never really fit in those boxes, They never really said, like, people look at the Xbox One and they look at the PS4 and then they look at the Wii U and they're like, why isn't this exactly like those things? And they're like, well, because we're not as interested in those things. Why aren't they doing a live press conference at E3 in the Nokia Theater? Why didn't they fill that out again? Because they'd rather talk to Jim Henson and make puppets of themselves and run around and have fun. Like, it's hard for us, right? Because everything has to fit in boxes, and I know our audience is guilty of this as much as I am, of sort of being like, why aren't you just like everyone else? Why don't we have 3 identical pillars in the video game industry? And we don't. And that's what Iwata strived for, is being a games company, being this irreverent, funny, quirky, different thing. And that has its ups and downs, and that's for a different show entirely, obviously. But I think that's what makes him so special, and then byproduct of that, what makes Nintendo so special, is that they dare to dream. They really just want to try something special.
What's wonderful about it, though, is that even when a Nintendo device doesn't sell as well as one of the other machines, right? As happened with the GameCube.
Yep.
You go back to the GameCube and you see how many absolutely amazing games were on that machine. Like, while the machine is out there, you're part of a more privileged group of people who have given this device a chance and are getting some really cool experiences as part of that machine's life cycle. But you always know there is another alternative. Like, people are very worried about that. But if Nintendo one day said, you know what, we're not going to make a console anymore, we're going to make games for another platform, right? Be it PC or be it consoles that somebody else makes, they'd do great. They'll be fine.
Yeah.
Just like there is a strategy to make their own machines, and it's fun for us to have those machines. They'd be very successful making games for others because they have preserved something that is very unique. When you start a game like Animal Crossing, even Splatoon, you start that game, it's so the style and like how it works and how it sounds is so different from what's on the market. Yeah. I think that's
when the presentation is very, very original. I mean, I have complained in the past of the whole TV divas leading the Splatoon programming, for example. But at the same time, that's so like funny to me. Like it's so cool and in another respect, right? And I can't help but respect that. Same thing with Animal Crossing, where you're someone who's moving to a town for the first time, and somehow, despite whatever entry it is, they make that feel unique. And they have tapped into, at least with the newer installments, something different or unexpected to find. Like, I love that new Leaf. It was, oh, you're the mayor this time. It's like, wait, what? What are you talking about?
and that's why, to your question, where we and others sometimes ask, why can't they just do something like the other guys, right? Like, we talked about voice acting in the Zelda series in the past. But, like, if they made the next Zelda game look exactly like Skyrim, it just wouldn't be Nintendo anymore, right? Like, and that's, you don't want that. You want this quirky presentation style and this different feeling about this company.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, after 7 press conferences in a row at E3 or whatever it was, I was ecstatic to watch puppets. I was so happy to see something different.
2014, what was the year of the neck stabbings? Was that 2014?
Oh, yeah, it was in every video.
It was like, ring, every video ended with like, chung, knife in the neck, and then Nintendo was completely different, right? That's, you need that.
Yeah, no, 100%. All right, well, I think we should transition off this topic and talk a little bit about Brian's experience at Comic-Con and checking out some Nintendo games while he was there. But before we do that, wherever you are right now, and I'm talking to you, dear listener, wherever you are right now, whatever you're doing right now, I want to ask you if you could just set it aside and for the next 30 seconds, join us in a moment of silence for the late, great president of Nintendo, Satoru Iwata. All right, and we'll be right back.
Listen!
Welcome back. Jose Otero here with Brian Altano and Per Schneider.
Hey.
So, Brian, last week was not New York Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con.
Oh, not yet, man. Get me all twisted.
That's coming up in October.
Yep.
But you were down in San Diego checking out some video games on a live show. You got to touch new Amiibo. Tell us stories, man.
I was.
What did you see?
So I handled almost all of our live show stuff for E3 with Nintendo, and I did the same with San Diego Comic-Con, which is really cool that we have a huge set in the Hard Rock, and Nintendo came by with multiple times with a bunch of different things, and it was cool because it was like mini Christmases each time. It was like, well, what do you got now? Oh, I got Yokai Watch. What do you got now? Chibi Robo. Okay, cool. What do you got now? I have 6 Amiibo that aren't out yet, and I was like, this is getting better by the minute. This is great. So I mean, we talked a lot about Iwata in the top half of the show, obviously. And one thing I wanted to mention was that obviously we talked about how many games that he had a hand in, and those aren't out yet. those aren't all done yet. Those will continue to release. I mean, Mario Maker is something that he had a hand in. Zelda is something he had a hand in. So it's kind of cool to know that, that I think that ideas and things that he set will be there for generations. And so I got to see some of this stuff. I got to see the news. I got to play the new Zelda game for 3DS again, which
I
is.
thought you were gonna say for Wii U.
No, for Wii U. Yeah, I didn't want to tell you guys. I didn't do any videos or report on it or anything like that. No, you guys would be beating the hell out of me if I did that.
I heard you guys sucked at it or something. Somebody said it was really hard.
The new
Triforce
Heroes has 4 separate dungeons in the demo that we played.
Same as E3.
Yeah, same as E3. So we all played them. The lava dungeon specifically is very difficult. Not really because it's laid out so tough, but because it really comes down to teamwork.
And you guys are so dysfunctional.
And
it
it's
was
so-
just
God,
no way.
yeah,
Who'd you play with?
I was like a young god when I played that. So just so
Yeah.
you know,
I played with one of the Nintendo reps who I feel like we definitely let down, and and Joshua Yale, who's one of our comic editors out of the LA office. He's also a huge Nintendo fan.
Yeah.
Lots of us are obviously. And so Triforce Heroes was one of the games we played. And we did the thing where we tried communicating, we tried being generous and wonderful to each other, and then just every now and then, just someone is just an evil person and picks somebody up and throws them away.
Someone.
So yeah, someone.
Does someone want to reveal his name?
Hi.
Starts
So
It's with Brian.
starts with A and ends with a.
yeah, and so I've really noticed with this game that it's different than any other Zelda game in that I really feel like you have to send people in different directions and have them do little micromanagement tasks, and you need someone like someone has to kind of step up as team leader, like is what happens on like Survivor or like Lost when the
Or
ship
Destiny.
or Destiny. Someone's just kind of be
hey,
like,
you
I'm
do
the guy.
this, you do that, I'll do this.
You share hearts. And
you
stuff,
share hearts,
right?
so that's the thing.
Very different feel.
It's easy to sort of get out there and just start hacking and slashing and stuff and throwing bombs willy-nilly and falling into pits. But every now and then you need someone to look up and be like, hey, we have 3 hearts left. Like, you got to go get some hearts. We're going to handle business back here.
I just want to make it clear, if Joshua's terrible at games, feel free to throw him under the bus right now.
Oh, Joshua, you are terrible at games.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding. He's good. He was good. But so the boss we fought was classic sort of Link to the Past, Link's Awakening boss, that big kind of slug thing with a circular object, snail slug thing with the.
You're talking about the boss from the Tower of Hera.
Yeah, he's like
In,
a series of
in,
spheres
Link's
that get smaller and
to-
smaller.
Yeah, okay.
And he's got that tail you got to hit, and you're like, man, I fought this guy like 15 times.
Then he picks the tail up.
Yeah, and you're like, there's nothing really new about this. Then you realize the tail changes colors, and depending on what color it changes, he chases that Link.
Yeah.
So if he turns blue, he goes after you, and you're like, all right, he's chasing me, so that gives the other 2. So I got to run decoy and kind of be like, hey, over here. It's like bullfighting, right? And then the other 2 go up behind him and stab him, and you're like, that's pretty simple, fair enough, got that. Then he lifts his tail up a little bit, and you're like, all right, well, I got to lift up somebody else while he chases the third person.
Yeah.
Now, keep that in mind with the fact that the color keeps changing, and that when you pick people up, it's so easy to just accidentally throw them into the lava that you're like, I got you. Whoa, I threw you away. So all of a sudden, he gets to the third phase, and that's when he is just flashing different colors, and his tail's raised way up that you need all 3 people in a pillar. And that's when it was just like running around from this guy while holding up 2 of my friends was basically impossible. And I kept throwing them away, or they kept picking me up or throwing me away or pushing each other off a ledge. And we died. We died repeatedly. We died maybe 7 times.
This
in
is
a
the
row.
hardest dungeon on that demo that I know
hands down,
of. Yeah,
hands down.
Yeah, no joke. So don't think that you're going to walk into Triforce Heroes and just steamroll everything.
Yeah, and I think like I was a little worried about this game being sort of the stopgap Zelda between, I think, Link Between Worlds and Zelda for Wii U. And also that it's mostly dungeon-based, because I'm like, well, how many times can you play the same dungeon over and over? And I think a lot. And I think that's because every time you play, it feels different based on who you're playing with. Yeah. And I don't think you get that in regular Zelda games, because item placement and enemy placement's always the exact same way in every Zelda game. But this, all of a sudden, you can go in and play with a different item than everybody else.
That's
you can
what
be
I was
the bomb
thinking.
guy.
Yeah, there's choice, right?
Yeah.
Like you walk into a dungeon and there's only one bow and arrow.
Yeah.
and so the second time you play, you might want to grab that.
There's also lots of branching paths because there's a lot of like specifically in the lava level there was a couple areas where it split off into 3 different ways, and the green guys on one side, blue guys in the middle, and red guys on the left, and they're all working their little puzzles and then connecting with each other here and there.
It is.
How about how about the outfits? Just out of curiosity, did that affect the way you played at all?
Yeah.
And what outfits did you pick?
If you wear the princess outfit, you get more hearts. So if everybody wears the princess outfit, you get more hearts for everybody. So if you're struggling in that game and you want to play it on super easy mode, wear a dress. Everybody gets a dress. Everybody has more hearts. It's fine. If you wanted to, sort of reduce the difficulty a little bit, make sure that doesn't happen at all. So you start off with a weapon, but that some people get advantages in those weapons, like arrows or bombs.
Bombs boosted, yeah.
So you'll find bombs in the wild, but watching them grow, and then it's the difference between playing Ocarina of Time and being able to pick up a bomb and then just always having bombs on you, right?
Yeah.
So the blue guy who's in his like bomber costume, he's got bombs the entire time, and when you're fighting one of the bosses who needs to be killed with bombs, you can either pick up the ones off the ground and throw them, which is cumbersome and takes a while, or you can just have that guy take care of it. So there's ways to do it either way. You'll beat the stage no matter what, unless you're us.
Yeah.
But it's really what it comes down to is deciding how you want to play. If you're aggressive, if you're like kind of not really a healer, but somebody who wants to kind of be a little more pacifist and hang back and collect hearts, or if you're somebody who wants to fight from a distance, you use a bow and arrow, or even that wind weapon. What's it called?
Gust jar.
The
That's
gust jar.
what I was going to bring up.
Yeah,
you
which
can
is,
use that to like push a bomb and throw it towards
and
something.
the really interesting thing about the gust jar is that you use it to send your friends all over the dungeon. So that leads to so much disaster because it's not just like throwing somebody.
Sure.
It's like to get somebody across a pit, you have to blow them, lack of a better term.
Yeah. Well,
and they get shot over there.
I know the exact part you're talking about. When that lava dungeon starts, you see the items in front of you, with 2 other players. You go forward, and there's a gap that you have to cross that cannot be jumped across, and you can't throw someone across.
Right.
So it's the job of the person with the gust jar to stand at the edge in front of someone who he can then, or she can shoot across to the other side, and then that person should have the boomerang so that they can take the boomerang, throw it over, and bring the person with the gust jar to that side. That's the first puzzle of that dungeon, and it just continues to get more difficult from there, where you have to be standing on a certain switch at a certain time, and if you didn't all hit the switch at the right time, the puzzle door doesn't open, or you get damaged, or something like that.
Yep. So that's
my one disappointment with the E3 demo. I think the E3 demo is really smart because it shows you ultimately what that game is and how co-op play works and how you're all in it together because of that heart bar. But it doesn't really showcase the types of materials you're getting and how those materials will then be spun into the outfit itself.
Yeah.
It's the barest essentials without really giving that part of it away. And this is a game that's coming out this holiday, I believe. I wouldn't be surprised if this was a November, October game. So it's just something to put out there.
Yeah,
right?
it's a vertical slice demo. I mean, this is the same. So for reference, Nintendo books out this area in a hotel adjacent to Comic-Con, and they fill the room with demo kiosks and a set where they had Charles Martinet talking to gamers for the next 3 days. The year before, they did a live show in there with like warp pipes and everything. It's just this really fun, magical room, and it's funny to me because I know that like the week before that was probably some like restaurant food chain company was in there being like, well, how do we raise the profits? And Nintendo just rolls in with this like truck of magic and just puts cool stuff everywhere. So I mean, I had played Bayonetta there the year before, and they had physically stood in front of the cutscenes when they were running because they didn't want to give anything away. So there's sort of, you get that aspect of games like this, of just like, this is a piece of it. But I think that will kind of inspire more playthroughs on levels if we know what that farming thing is about. If going back and grinding and collecting stuff gets you back into the overworld or the shop where you can buy cool stuff, that's going to make me want to play the dungeons over and over even more.
Yeah, and collect every outfit, which ultimately is what you want.
That's what it needs, because my initial worry was it's like 4 Swords, where you'll have fun playing through it once, but then it's kind of like the MacGuffin, the trick, and you're not going to want to play it again.
So,
but it does. I will say it already feels better than 4 Swords, just mechanically. I think the height stacking, like I fought a boss where I had to throw one of my friends on top of the boss in order to attack him, and then the boss raised one level. You're like, oh, now we have to pick up 2 friends.
Yeah.
So I will say this though, it's definitely better than the original 4 Swords, but I don't think 4 Swords Adventures gets enough good
I like that
praise.
game.
That game was such an improvement over vanilla Four Swords, which I appreciate that the anniversary version exists, but I can complain all day about.
Well,
that
I mean,
game.
it doesn't get enough love because the barrier for entry was so high. Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you needed a bunch of systems and a bunch of people in the room at the same
And link
time.
cables.
And link cables.
Yep.
I'm not.
Still have
I'm
4.
actually, in terms of Four Swords for GameCube, it's probably the least inspired Zelda game. It's probably my least favorite. So when I saw that this was a multiplayer Zelda game, I groaned. And every single time I play this game, I love it more.
Yeah.
Every single time I get
That's
hands on
great.
with this game, I'm really excited for it. I think it's
All
very special.
So you are Mr. Anti-Pokemon, but are you so far interested or uninterested in Yokai Watch?
I think it's a incredibly fun, quirky, fascinating looking game. I'm gonna have to play it myself to see, but I think that the humor that's there is impeccable. It
Some
is
of the yokai are called what's that? Like
Oh my
I remember
God.
that's the name of one of them. Like the localization is very well done.
I mean,
from what
the
I can tell.
stage we had on our live show, which they basically went into this bathhouse and they had to steal underwear from this guy, this fat guy in a bathtub, and he got out and they kept punching this boil on his stomach. It was very like King Hippo, which I don't know where that comes from. They're really into that, you know. Japanese culture is really into just a half naked guy that you.
button.
Yeah, but it's like a car, but it's also a target.
It has an X on
It's
it.
it's a glowing weak spot.
Wait, your belly button doesn't have an X on it?
No, I mean
How
no
do
one's ever
people know your
punched
weak
it.
spot?
Let him keep his shirt on.
My weak
please.
spot is love. I think it's really really awesome. I think I can't wait to see how it translates to America in terms of children are completely unpredictable, right? I have no idea if they're going to latch onto this or not. I hope they will because it definitely looks like something special. To me, I think it's more interesting artistically and thematically than Pokemon, personally. Pokemon's something I never really got super into, but this is just ridiculous enough that I really want to check it out.
Some
I really
of the
can't wait.
best graphics I feel on 3DS are in Yokai Watch. Like level 5 absolutely crushed the look of Yokai Watch on that screen, which is something that people might get a little bit upset with me about this, but I don't think Pokemon X and Y or Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire really nailed it the way Yokai Watch nails it. I will say that. I don't know if the gameplay is there to support my interest. I'm very, very interested, but I don't know how long that's gonna keep me going.
Yeah.
But I will say that, man, that is a pretty looking game.
Yeah, I'm super interested to play it. I think it's going to be really just fun and unique, and it's going to lead to a lot of really stupid stories like the one I just told of sneaking
the
into a
bathhouse
bathhouse
thing.
to steal a guy's underwear and then beating up his belly button.
So it wasn't on your radar really, but when you got the underwear stealing, now you're in.
That's when I was just like,
Yep.
I mean, I love games that they're unabashedly stupid sometimes that are just so goofy and endearing and wonderful for that. I play so many games that are just like I played Arkham Knight for 20 hours, and it's got moments like that where you don't steal underwear, but where it's we're a video game, we're having
Stop
fun.
the guys from stealing on the
Yeah, but you do. But I think that a lot of video games are now they have to be so serious and mature and gritty, and Yokai Watch was so goofy, and I love it for that. So yeah, I can't wait to check that out.
Yeah. You play anything else? You got to hold some new Amiibo in your
So
hands.
they brought some new Amiibo on the show. I got
held
to
the
hold
new Mario,
the
right?
new Mario
Yeah.
ones, which are fascinating to look
Shiny.
at.
Is it
one?
heavy?
Very heavy.
It is very
I would
heavy.
say
Pixelated 3D one. Right?
Yeah,
I-
which is on a warp pipe base. That's one of the first different bases they've had outside of the Animal Crossing.
I
ones,
would
sorry.
say it's probably a little bit heavier than the Bowser or King DDD Amiibo. I think they're up there with some of the heaviest. What do you think the heaviest Amiibo is?
DDD?
DDD?
We should have put this to the test. Put him on scales. or
He's a
something.
heavy dude.
Can
Yeah.
somebody out there please weigh them
Weigh the
off
Amiibo.
for us? If you have a kitchen scale, we needs to know.
I mean,
So,
the
yeah, so I
heaviest
think-
three are those three. No,
It's
the
gotta
Bowser,
be, yeah.
Day-to-Day.
I think the new 8-bit
Rob is
Mario
gonna be up
ones are totally up there. They're also large. They're very big.
Yeah, it's-
they're tall. If you're one of those people that has if you bought an Amiibo shelf that's kind of low, I know there's some characters like Pit and a couple other are already kind of touching the sky a little bit. These things are pretty tall and they're pretty wide and they're cool and they're very fascinating to kind of spin around because from the side they are iconic and recognizable, and from the front you're like, I've never seen 8-bit Mario from that angle
Oh
before.
wow, yeah, that's
They're very
cool.
it's very fun to look at.
It's the face when he bites it, like
Kind
it's
of,
a
yeah,
weird,
but
like,
it's
you
the-
can never tell what his face
Yeah,
is in
yeah.
those scenes, right?
So I'm interested and terrified to see if they make a whole line of 8-bit characters like this, because I think they're really onto something. I think it's a very smart art direction. I know Konami tried making these kind of flat figurines of Simon Belmont based on the NES Castlevania that had that same sort of like 3D pixel look to them, but Nintendo just nailed it with this. And the warp pipe base is awesome. I'm a little confused as to why they made 2 of them, but then I also know because people like us buy them all that's why they made 2.
Well, there's more and more I'm noticing that when they reference 8-bit Mario, they're referencing 2 types. It's either the original that had sort of a brown and red overall, brown shirt, red overalls, or if you look at like Super Mario 3D World, the Mario sprite that is there is red, blue with white gloves, and it's just like, well, when like it's a bit more modern-ish, but like I always wondered about that, like why is that a thing?
And I was talking
initially it didn't look that way.
I was talking about how Amiibo are awesome because they and it's very smart. They look better when there's more of them together, right? But I think this is one of the few that can totally stand on its own. If you're one of those people that are just like, I only want 1 or 2 Amiibo, like get the Mario one and put it on your desk at work.
It looks very different. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, the Yoshi ones obviously don't
Yeah.
quite match the look of
Nope.
the others.
No.
I like that though.
So they also brought the Chibi Robo Amiibo, which they're sort of touting as the only life-size Amiibo.
Because Chibi Robo
Yeah,
is really
he's the only
small.
character that's like actually to scale.
Isn't that one nice?
It's very
The
nice, and it's
silver, like the plug and everything, just looks.
the
so
silver
good.
looks cool. I'm a little bummed out that he's just resting on grass. Like I wish he was doing an action shot. I guess after all the Smash Brothers ones, one of them
He's out
needed
of
a break.
energy.
Yeah.
He is out of energy. He needs
Yeah,
to plug
he's
in.
looking to where to plug.
Yeah.
It's a frantic search.
So he's cool. He's a one-off. I mean, we haven't seen any of those yet, right? We've saw the closest we've seen is the Splatoon.
Splatoon is the closest thing to Chibi Robo in terms of I'm shocked this got an Amiibo.
Yeah.
Like
So he's a
honestly.
one-off. You can only get him with the game in a bundle. So if you're a digital consumer like I am, like tough luck, give it away to somebody.
So it's kind of like the squid in the Splatoon set.
Yeah,
You can only get the squid if you
well,
bought the 3-pack.
the squid you could buy in the 3-pack. But
but that's what I mean. Yeah, that was
yeah.
the only way in the U.S. to get him. I know in other territories he's a separate pack.
So this you have to buy with a physical game. So if you're a collector and you want it, that's. I mean, I'm already starting to do the thing in my head where I'm like, do I need that? Do I not need that?
Do you need that?
I think I need that.
Okay.
So then I went hands on with the 2 types of Animal Crossing Amiibo. One is the standard, the new figures that they're making with the grass pattern on the bottom. Super well done, gorgeous. Like as you know, the Amiibo that they've made for the Smash Brothers line, the less human looking they are, sort of the better they are.
Yeah.
The kind of cartoony ones are my favorite kind, and these are amazing. Like Isabelle looks great, Totake looks great, or KK Slider, however he's known here in the States.
I'm surprised they didn't go with the Yoshi, like just sort of a plush version, just because Animal Crossing villagers are so soft. Like,
yeah,
I mean, honestly.
yeah.
You know?
I like it though. I like the
Alright.
way it looks, and like I love the grass, the stylized
nice.
grass and like leaf patterns from that game.
Yeah.
Just lend themselves to these
So this
3D
this is when they really get collectors, right? Because it's like me, I'm not a big Pokemon guy, but because I want the whole Smash set, I bought all the Pokemon. Like I don't think Jigglypuff is a good amiibo. I don't think he's a good character. I hate that guy. If I'm going to be honest on this Nintendo show.
That's okay.
But I got his figure because he's part of a set. But when I get to like a 5th string Animal Crossing character who's like, hey, I fix shoes in the town on the DS game, you're kind of like, do I really need you? So I think I'm going to skip these. Really? No, really. I'm running out of shelf space.
No.
I don't have a house. I got a
his
1-bedroom
wife's
apartment.
patience. He's not hiding things in the garage like you do.
Well,
and
so
then
here,
saying,
like
"Plop, schmuck."
my wife asked me the other day. She was like, "So how many more of these do you need to get?" And I was like, "Ha, well, that's a tricky question because the Smash Brothers set has about 10 or 12 more left in them because they had to break the Mii fighters out in the 3 characters, which I wish they never did. And then there's the Chibi Robo, and then there's maybe one more Yoshi one, and blah 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 blah, and all of a sudden the 2 Mario ones. But there's also a Rob Famicom version who's only available in Japan. So a lot.
You said this to her?
Yeah.
Like
Why
I
do you
looked
say
up because
that
I
to
thought
her?
you were just talking to us. Then I'm
No,
like,
no,
wait,
she knows what
he's
she
still
married.
talking to his wife.
Say, oh, there's no.
No, I mean, the half of my life is just hearing, no, that's nice, honey.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's if you marry somebody that can just look at you and hear you babble about garbage and go, that's nice, then you're doing okay.
Until she sees that you're gonna buy 8 more shelves.
Then that's a problem.
That's gonna be a conversation.
So the secondary ones I went on with hands on with for the first time was the cards. And the cards are really cool. They're a lot sort of heftier than I thought they'd be. They don't feel like paper cards. They don't even feel like plastic cards. They feel somewhere in between the two. They feel sturdy, and they have this cool gloss on the back of them that has kind of a hologram glimmer to them. And like playing cards, you can't tell from one side which one you're holding until you flip them over. So I don't know what they're going to do with that because it's weird to...
You got to remember, if Nintendo knows how to make quality playing cards.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
This is in the DNA of that company. And if you've seen any of the special edition sets, like the see-through Mario cards or any of the kind of classic Nintendo playing cards, like the nylon-based ones, they're just really nice. So I was expecting these to be good.
And these have, NFC chips inside them,
Yeah,
or something, flattened versions of them. So
well, I mean, NFC chips are flat whether they're in the figure or whether they're in the Yoshi Amiibo or whether they're in the card. But the cool thing with those, did they explain to you the whole there's villager cards and there's special character cards?
So that's where it gets confusing. Is you pick one up and it says Tom Nook 1 out of 26. And you go to the next thing, it's like Isabel 1 out of 15.
That's his birthday. So the numbers are actually the birth date. Remember, Animal Crossing is all about birth dates.
Oh,
and
that's
signs and so you said that on the live stream, and I was just sitting at home like just face palming. I'm like, no, Brian, that's a birthday.
You have to use the hashtag IGN Live and ask us questions, and we'll read them on Twitter just for you.
I didn't want to do that
I'm kidding.
you, though. I just waited till I saw you in person. But I will say,
3 weeks later. Hey, I got a bone to pick with you 3 weeks later.
That's a birthday. So I was told when I demoed this game, which, by the way, is on my new 3DS right now, because it's not for sale yet in Japan, but it will be at the end of the month.
Okay.
So you can play the game completely. You can pre-order on the eShop. Remember, that's the thing. So but waiting 14 days for it to unlock, the agony. But anyway, there are 333 villagers in that game.
How many cards are there?
333? They said that the cards, the first set is only going to be roughly 100.
Oh, only? Good.
Yeah. It's going to be roughly.
I'm putting this on record right now.
And they're random, right?
In Japan, they are random. You're buying a pack of 3 at a chance to get one. I don't know if that's going to be the way they do it
on
here.
record right now. I'm not touching these. No.
You draw
especially
the line.
no, because they're blind packed, so
In
you
Japan.
don't know. And I think that's how it'll be in America.
Could be.
Where you don't know which ones you're getting, so you get a bunch of doubles, and you can trade with your friends, and I could totally see us doing that.
Yeah.
Like, I would trade with you.
You're not trading with me because I'm not getting into this. No, that's not going to happen. You're going to have to find somebody else. You're going to have to trade with Jose and a bunch of other people out there because I'm out of that.
So I'm very interested to play this game because it has some really fun elements, I think. I think that the design part of that game is actually very fun. It sucks that you don't have the traditional sort of town view and visiting other people, but you have complete other control of how they live, which is just it's very different than how you expect Animal Crossing to be. Like, usually in Animal Crossing, if I wanted you to use something in your place, your villager either asks me for something and then I go buy it, or I go to your house with a present. I'm like, here, take this, and then either they take it or they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not touching it.
I don't think I'm going to go for completion on the set as well. It's very tempting. If there are a lot of people in the office, maybe that's a possibility.
For Happy Home Designer.
Because of trades.
Will you play the game regardless, though? Because you can play it without the cards.
I'm going to play the game regardless. And I'm going to buy a couple of packs of cards.
The cards are strictly for, and it's interesting because they are for more of a cosmetic / side function. Like, you can basically summon any villager if you have their card and therefore decorate their house. There are special characters that regular villagers you can assign to any job on Main Street, but special character cards you can't.
No, I mean, I think it's a great idea. I'd love to see the sort of, I mean, they mentioned this from the start, right? Like, these character cards replace, or being able to replace regular Amiibo in some capacity, and it'd be cool to have the whole Smash Brothers set as character cards, or like, Yarn Yoshis, or all the other little things. Because one day people will run out of shelf space, or maybe they don't want to spend that much money. Blind packaging them is where it gets tricky, because if you don't have people directly near you that you can trade with, that can get cumbersome.
Well, I think the big question looming for me about this Animal Crossing, and then we're going to actually cut because we're going a little over here, is that Happy Home Showcase became a really fun part of my Animal Crossing experience with New Leaf. Like, street passing with you and Pear and being able to look at Pear's house, which was an absolute wreck, by the way. I just want to say on this podcast, I believe I
have a lot of stuff I'm collecting. What I'm going to do with it?
Was an interesting part of the game, street passing with people and then checking on the neighborhood to see what items you'd find in their house and then using the showcase to order them. Gave it a sort of utility that I didn't expect Animal Crossing to have, and so far I don't see Happy Home Designer approaching it in any way, at least in what I know about it. So hopefully someone who at Nintendo will help bring to light if this is still a thing or if there's something similar to it, because I really enjoyed that. It was just a window into your mind a little bit, like, well, this is Brian decorated his house, and then you go and you find, like, there's a TV production set in his bedroom.
I built the Up at Noon set in my back room. I built the IGN studio.
in his
my bedroom.
Yeah, in the bedroom, got cameras, and I'm just like, okay,
Well, no,
Brian.
we put it like that. I don't have cameras in the bedroom. All right.
I'm more like a squirrel.
I'm a
Like,
private
the
man.
house,
I don't keep cameras in the bedroom.
just put whatever I found into my house.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yours had a
That's a
really
hoarder.
interesting
You had a
name.
hoarder
I'm trying
house.
to remember.
I've done themed houses before.
No, but this is just
the
called like Craft or
950th
something.
Huh?
I can't remember, but you had a strange name for the house.
I don't remember.
I'm the only person who almost.
Anyway,
remembers.
lastly, really quickly,
Go for it,
Super
yeah.
Mario Maker. We got to play the levels that the experts played at the Nintendo World Championships, and we got our asses whooped.
Really?
Those
Family
are
show. Family show.
hard.
Yeah.
Butts. We had our butts whooped.
There you go. Very
Asses
nice.
are donkeys.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very
right?
nice.
Okay, we got our butts whooped. They were very hard levels, and it's definitely one of those, like, I remember watching the World Championships and being like, man, these are really hard levels. They're really hard levels, but those guys were awesome at them. Really hard levels with people who are not nearly as good as the best people in the world at those games are in for a brutal awakening, because those really kick your butt.
So last week, Trinan was on the show, and he said that one of his favorite things coming out of E3 was you saying, "I think I understand esports." when you saw,
because that excitement and that energy in that room, like
Yeah.
it's I totally get it. I totally get it.
Just took a game that you actually understood.
Yeah.
Which
So-
and not many, but
So Nintendo actually made a new stage that they brought on our live show, which exclusively for us, which was really cool. We got to see a stage that was based on
chomps and stuff.
what was based on the they brought us a stage that was based on the Zelda 2
Dungeon.
temple,
Yes.
the temples
I
from
remember
Zelda
this.
2 for
I remember
NES,
this.
yeah.
where you walk in, it's blue background. There's a stairwell going up. There's the columns and everything like that,
Yeah.
and then you take the elevator down, which was the warp pipe.
Oh, not the forest one. There was a Zelda forest one too at E3. You
yeah.
saw that one? Yeah.
No, this
This
one was
was
straight up
different.
the horizontal
Very cool.
dungeons, and even down to where they hid the key in the first in the first dungeon, where it's it's underneath that archway, and you fight a skeleton, and it's in a wall. They made you go by and fight a bad guy, and then go into the wall and get the power up there and keep
That's
going.
great.
You recognized it right away.
Within
Yeah.
seconds, and they were sort of like, "Does this ring any bells?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Yeah,
Yeah.
this is one. I love this game.
Yeah.
I'm one of the the more outspoken Zelda 2 apologists or champions.
You don't
I
have
would
to
say.
be an
Champions,
apologist.
no
I
apologies
think
here.
people that game gets a lot of bad rap from people
Because it's not the same.
because it's not the same.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but it was good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's harder if you want a challenge, play the Japanese
And we got
version.
to see that item screen of making a level that you and I had sort of hypothesized. What's that bottom row? It's all blank.
Yeah.
All of that is your favorite. So you can the stuff that you most commonly use
Nice.
when you're creating your tile sets.
Yeah.
Just drop it right in there. As always, incredibly intuitive, really fun. I again, same thing with that game. I can't get enough of it. I can't wait
Sweet.
for it. So
Okay.
Did you see the
Yeah.
cat paw?
the which one?
The cat paw?
Oh yeah, the cat paw's great.
Yeah.
So I don't know if
yeah.
that stuff's gonna be like unlockables or like how that's gonna work.
We don't know
I
for
did
sure, but-
hear I
well-
did hear that 100 levels thing is not confirmed. I don't know who started that rumor about it shipping with 100 levels,
Okay.
but they pretty much said to me like that's the thing people just started saying, and we haven't confirmed that. So make of it what
that
you will.
came from a website in the UK. It wasn't something people were just saying.
Okay.
But
Well, websites in
that's
the
where
UK can say
Well,
things
I mean,
too.
Europe put something out before they were supposed to. I mean, surprise, they did it at E3.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
did it as something else. Like, I wish I had a chart for how many times
I
Europe
know,
did something
I know.
Europe wasn't supposed to
Yep.
do. We love you, Nintendo Europe.
What's them? Amazon France is always snitching. Amazon France is like, oh, we got a new game. Oh, we shouldn't have told you that.
Half-Life 3.
Yeah. So yeah, that was pretty much it. I mean, there was a couple other things here and there. Chibi Robo looks cool. It's definitely kind of like a quirky side thing. It's not something. It doesn't feel as kind of robust as the other stuff they're doing, but I'm glad they're making it. It's definitely different than anything else they've made for that series.
Yeah, I'm curious to try it because as someone who just likes like action games, like I'm very interested to play
Yeah.
a bit more of
Yeah.
Chibi Robo. So we'll see.
And you're not
Cool.
getting a 2D Metroid game this year.
You,
So
you see anything else really cool before we end the show? Like anything really cool at Comic-Con cosplay?
Any good Nintendo cosplay?
I saw lots of good Nintendo cosplay. You get a lot of the thing I saw that was really
Some guys
gross.
we met at E3 were dressed as
Oh,
Splatoon.
my favorite cosplay. Man, I wish I got a picture of you. I saw a picture of like a gritty, mature Ness that was covered in blood.
What?
Like he had just gotten out of like the most brutal Smash Brothers fight ever, but he looked like a kid. Yeah, that was
That's
fantastic.
creepy.
It was really messed up. I think he had his like bloody
See,
yo-yo
I
and
just get
everything.
the Majora's Mask kids and take photos. Like I saw one of the best Skull kids I'll
Yeah.
ever see in my life at New York Comic Con 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, there's lots of cool stuff like that.
Instead, you get Bloody Ness. What's the deal?
I don't know, man.
Yeah.
That's they just gravitate towards me. I don't know what to
Clearly,
say.
yeah. All right. Well, some folks we met at E3 went and dressed cosplay as Splatoon, but I don't know if they ran into you. It was really cool. Yeah,
that's right. That's
dressed
right.
up as the
I will
Squid
say
kids.
I got to ask Mike Tyson on our live show what's going on with Mike Tyson's Punch Out 2, and he was like, "You got to talk to Nintendo."
Okay.
So
Okay.
Nintendo, if you're listening, I know it's probably not the best business decision to get in bed with that guy because he is a monster. But yeah, we want more Punch Out.
There you
Did
go.
you meet any NVC fans?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Always. That always happens. That's one of my favorite parts of working those shows.
Cool.
Is running into the people that are on the other side of the microphone. Thank you so much for listening. You guys are awesome. And
Awesome.
always say hello. I get a lot of people tweeting me saying, I saw Brian walk by, but I was so afraid to say hello.
Oh man.
Always say hello. You might never see me again. We might both get hit by different sides of the same bus walking out of there. Just say hello. Life is
Just say
short.
hello. All right, well, there you have it. Thank you very much for listening to Nintendo Voice Chat. We are a weekly show on IGN, but we are not the only show on IGN. And next week, if all works out very well, which I hope it does, I will have a very cool surprise for you listeners on the show. So make sure that you tune in.
Is it Bill Trinan again? Because I missed
no,
him. And I'm bummed about that.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
Bill, come back.
Yeah, no, at some point. I mean, this is definitely a tough time for Bill and a bunch of folks, but hopefully in the future we'll be able to get him back on the show. I know that he said he had a good time, so it would be cool. But yeah, there's a ton of other content on the site. Make sure you come check it out. I mean, we have features, we have videos, we have so much stuff. The fighting game tournament, the Evolution Championship, is this weekend. You should check that out. EVO is an event. It is something that you absolutely should not miss. And if you do have to miss a day, don't miss Sunday, because Sunday is when finals happen. Sunday is when you see top 8. You're going to see Smash Melee there. You're going to see Smash Wii U there. You're going to see Marvel, the marvelous Marvel tournament will be there. Street Fighter, you name it. Like, you should definitely check that out. And
Did I
then
tell you
in
I
2 weeks,
wanted to sneak into the Smash Brothers tournament at Comic-Con?
You did?
I wanted to.
For the underage kids?
Under 13. I was gonna shave and put on a backwards hat.
Oh
Try to sneak
man.
in.
Skateboard.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, just
Hey, I'm here. Hey, I'm here for the underage. Hi, I want to play Smash Brothers.
Nice.
And then I'd walk. They'd all beat me, and I'd leave.
They
Of course
did.
they would.
Oh,
Yeah.
Of course they
Of
would. Of course they
Yeah,
would.
they're pretty good. I need to put in some time with Smash.
Yeah.
All right. Also, you can leave us feedback on the show and Nintendo Voice Chat, which you can find on iTunes. You can head on over there, leave us a review, or email us, nvc@ign.com. Also, very soon we should be bringing up the question block again, which we haven't done in a while.
Yeah.
So make sure you send in your questions. Try and limit it to a few sentences. And remember, think about the discussion, not so much, should this be brought back? I want this game. Like, less of that, more of cool discussion, something that will lead to an interesting conversation. Lastly, you can find us on Twitter. You can find Per Schneider at
Pair IGN.
You can find Brian Altano at
Agent Bizzle.
And you can find myself, Jose_Otero. Thank you very much for listening. And we will be back next week with more Nintendo Voice Chat.